Hi, I'm Dale Wells. Welcome to our 2021 Miners Council class. This particular session I'm calling Fangs Out, Identifying and Defanging Emotional Vampires in Family Law. What is an emotional vampire? Well, the term emotional vampire is a kind of a colloquial term. It refers to toxic people, the kind of people who just drain us of our energy and leave us feeling emotionally exhausted. They're parasites, and because of their parasitic quality, they provoke an emotional reaction in other people and they feed off of their emotions as well as their resources. We've all heard the term emotional vampire, but what does it really mean? I consider emotional vampire to be a term of art for toxic people who deprive us of our energy and our sense of emotional safety and our ability to properly care for ourselves and our own needs. Being around an emotional vampire can cause us to feel depressed or anxious, frightened, confused, and in pain. It can affect our productivity, our ability to focus, and our overall mental, physical, and emotional well-being. The term is commonly used to describe narcissists and sociopaths who psychologically bleed us dry, but it can also be applied to garden variety toxic people who are so self-centered and self-absorbed. Whatever point at the spectrum the emotional vampire falls upon, however, he or she can take a real toll on your mental health. I first came across this term in a book by Albert Bernstein bearing the title Emotional Vampires, Dealing with People Who Drain You Dry. And I recommend that if you haven't read this book, you should read it. Every time I return to family law, I read it all over again. Bernstein takes the concept of vampires from the old vampire lore of centuries gone by. And he says there are two things you need to remember about vampires from the old vampire stories. The first is that vampires suck the life out of their victims. Empathetic and sensitive people might be especially susceptible to being around these types because emotional vampires are drawn to our warmth and our compassion and our energy. And they feast on these qualities to satiate themselves while leaving you and me feeling sick and drained. Second, he says, vampires, if you remember, can't see themselves in a mirror. No matter what drama is playing out around them, they cannot see their own part in creating that drama. As far as they're concerned, all of the drama is someone else's fault. It's certainly not theirs. So the bottom line is that emotional vampires suck the life out of you, one spectacularly sensational, melodramatic moment at a time. How do you know if you're dealing with an emotional vampire? Well, there are 7 signs that you can look for. For one thing, they drain you. They deplete you physically and emotionally so you're unable to care for yourself or be productive. Being around a toxic person is like being weighed down by heavy black tar. It can affect you on both a psychological and physiological level. You feel immobilized, your whole body can react. Maybe your heart beats faster, your palms sweat, you get an aching sense of something not being quite right in your gut or your heart. You might experience pain or physical ailments that come out of nowhere. Psychologically, you feel a diminished sense of agency and an increased sense of hopelessness. You're unable to react constructively because this toxic person's excessive sense of entitlement, their lack of empathy, their blatant disregard for your emotions seeps into every interaction you have with them. They drain your energy so that you're no longer able to put your full focus on the things that truly matter. Their goal, it seems, is to distract you with their manipulative tactics so that you're no longer serving your own needs. Instead, you're catering to their ego, exclusively serving them and their needs. There's a residual effect to this. When you're no longer in their presence, you might still feel affected by them. You find yourself ruminating over strange things they said or cruel things they did to you. You're likely to feel emotionally exhausted by their antics. their attempts to start drama, or their flagrant disrespect of your basic needs and rights. You find yourself questioning your own reality and being plagued with a persistent sense of self-doubt. Severe anxiety is common for empathetic people who have been touched by the impact of an emotional vampire. Depression is often inevitable as a side effect of being surrounded by emotional vampires for long periods of time. Then there's this matter of detoxing. It takes time. You start to feel energetic after you're away from them for a few days or a few weeks, however long it takes you to fully detox from them. When you've removed yourself from this toxic person and have had time to psychologically reset, you may feel lighter and happier and more productive. It's almost as if a great weight has been lifted and you're now able to move forward into greater clarity and renewed strength. However, if you do interact with them again, you find yourself once more swept away by their crazy-making chaos. And nothing's easy with them. Even a simple conversation with them over something that should have a simple solution leaves you feeling disoriented and confused. You find yourself explaining basic human decency and fairness and integrity to them over and over again, and they refuse to give you straight answers. They refuse to honor you as a person who deserves consideration and respect. They project their toxic traits onto you. They become overly defensive about their uncalled for behavior, and they're indifferent to the pain you may be experiencing due to their neglect or abuse. They're parasites. They're like a needle to a balloon, and their parasitic nature can make you feel like you're becoming toxic too. You see, emotional vampires feed off of your positive energy while leaving you malnourished. When you're feeling joyful and self-assured and confident, they come around to deflate you with put-downs and criticisms or underhanded tactics to sabotage or undermine you. Interestingly, just as mythical vampires can bite their victims and turn them into vampires, the longer you're around an emotional vampire, the more you start to pick up on some of their toxic habits and emotional states. For victims who've been terrorized by narcissists, psychologists call this getting narcissistic fleas. It's a temporary state of taking on some of the toxic traits you've been exposed to. That's why it's so important to get as far away as you possibly can, especially if you're an empathetic person who tends to internalize the emotions of others like a sponge. The last thing you need is to become so toxic yourself in response to these people that you forget where the predator begins and you end. There's no such thing as reciprocity with these folks. As far as they're concerned, you're here to fulfill their needs. It's perfectly fine for them to neglect yours. You see, emotional vampires are one-sided. That means whenever you're giving in to them, as empathetic people are likely to do, they're thrilled to take and take and take. Their conversations will usually center on them and feature them as the one and only person who's important. They make decisions that affect you without ever considering how you would feel about those decisions. They micromanage and control you to make themselves feel superior and powerful. As far as they're concerned, they are the end-all and be-all of everything. And they sabotage you. In fact, nothing gives them greater pleasure than putting you down and taking pleasure in sabotaging you. Emotional vampires on the higher end of the narcissistic spectrum tend to be pathologically envious of their victims. When they see that you're thriving and successful, it sparks jealousy in them. They want your resources for themselves, and they covet whatever you have. Rather than celebrating your success, they attempt to diminish it and undermine it or subtly detract from it in whatever way they can. They'll go so far as to create elaborate schemes or resort to petty ploys to do this, whether that means praising someone else or comparing you in a demeaning manner to somebody else, or attempting to hide you and make you less visible to those who may value you. They're always out to make a name for themselves and one-up anyone who threatens to take the spotlight away from them. Can you spot the emotional vampire? It may not be the one you think. Here's a good note for you to think about. If you can see yourself and how you contribute to the conflict, you're probably not an emotional vampire. If you can't see yourself and how you're contributing to the conflict, it could be that you are the emotional vampire. Is it maybe one of the other attorneys? Is it a parent, the in-parent or the out-parent? Or could it be that the children who play one parent against the other might be the emotional vampire in a family law case? Or maybe there are others, family members, friends who are kind of egging one party on or the other party. We all need to find ways that are creative to deal with the people who drain us dry. What do you do when you've been bitten by an emotional vampire? Well, if you've been the victim of an emotional vampire, it's important that you take a reprieve from this person's toxicity and cut off as much contact as you can with them. Sometimes the only way to end this type of parasitic connection is by going no contact. Cutting the cord at times is essential to paving the path back to emotional freedom. Don't try to reason with the emotional vampire any more than you already have. It simply will not work. Instead, use your mental resources for self-care. Meditate, do yoga, go for a run, reconnect with nature. Seek the warm and gentle comfort of a validating support network. Exercise your agency and reclaim your power by pursuing goals and dreams and friendships independent of this person. Use any and all resources that can help you detox from this unhealthy person and to move forward from this narcissist's toxic bite. Well, we're talking about family law minors counsel appointment. You're familiar with Family Code Section 3150A about appointment of minors counsel. If the court determines that it would be in the best interest of the minor child, the court may appoint private counsel to represent the interests of a child in a custody or visitation proceeding, provided that the court and counsel comply with the requirements set forth in Rules 5.240, 5.241, and 5.242 of the California Rules of Court. Rule 5.240A gives considerations that the court has to take under advisement. If the issues of child custody and visitation are highly contested or protracted, if the child is subjected to stress as a result of the dispute that might be alleviated by the intervention of counsel representing the child, if counsel representing the child would be likely to provide the court with relevant information not otherwise readily available or likely to become presented, if the dispute involves allegations of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse or neglect of the child, if it appears that one or both parents are incapable of providing a stable, safe, and secure environment, if counsel is available for appointment who is knowledgeable about the issues being raised regarding the child in the proceeding, if the best interest of the child appears to require independent representation, and if there are two or more children, any child would require separate counsel to avoid a conflict of interest. The best case on minors counsel continues to be marriage of Metzger, a 2014 case. Tammy and Raphael Metzger were married on November 2, 2003. Their daughter M was born the following year, 2004. Several years later, on July 30, 2009, Tammy filed a petition to dissolve their marriage with Raphael. The court ordered a separate trial on child custody issues and scheduled that trial for May of 2011. On April 12 of 2011, Tammy requested a continuance of the trial in order to give her time to have M evaluated for developmental delay. Tammy stated that she had only recently become aware that her daughter might have autism. Raphael opposed the request for a continuance. He argued that Tammy had already obstructed the progress of the proceedings by refusing to stipulate to a separate trial on child custody issues, by failing to appear for her deposition, by refusing to agree to alternate dates for her deposition, among other things. Raphael also argued that Tammy's new concern about developmental delay has no basis in reality. He says it was a stall tactic and that he failed to justify a continuance of the trial. It appears that the court granted multiple trial continuances. On January 20, 2012, the court entered a judgment of dissolution as to marital status only. The trial on custody issues appears to have begun in early 2013 and was eventually continued to October 21, 2013. In or around August 2013, it appears that Tammy filed a request for an order for an autism evaluation of M. Raphael opposed the request, arguing that M had already undergone 12 such evaluation sessions. Well, the court denied Tammy's request and issued an order to show cause as to why Eve Lopez should not be appointed as minors counsel for M, and why Raphael should not advance $100,000 to minors counsel as a retainer for her services, $50,000 of which would be chargeable to each party against their share of community property. Lopez has a master's degree in forensic psychology as well as a Juris Doctor degree, and has been appointed as minor counsel in dozens of cases involving a child with special needs. Well, Tammy filed a notice of non-opposition to the appointment of minors counsel. Raphael opposed the order to show cause on the grounds that the appointment of minors counsel violated his constitutional right to determine his daughter's needs and represent her interests, among other arguments. At the hearing on September 16, 2013, the court noted that the issue of whether M had autism would affect the court's custody award because if M did not have autism, her mom wants to subject her to a lot of stuff she should not be subjected to. And if M did have autism, then Judge Lewis said, I need to make sure that she gets the resources that she needs. The court further indicated that he felt that M needs someone to speak for her. Well, Raphael argued that Lopez was unfairly biased because she has an autistic child. The court's response was that there is no evidence but speculation that Ms. Lopez would be inclined to be biased. And as Judge Lewis put it, I think what she might be is more inclined to be knowledgeable. I see that she might have more knowledge than the average family law lawyer about matters related to autism spectrum disorder. That's frankly why I chose her. The court issued an order appointing Lopez as minors counsel to assist the court in determining the best interests of the child. Raphael moved ex parte for the revocation of the appointment of Eve Lopez as minors counsel, and the court denied the request. Raphael then appealed the order appointing minors counsel. Minors counsel Lopez filed a petition for writ of mandate seeking to have the appeal dismissed, and Tammy filed a joinder. On November 19, 2013, the District Court of Appeal issued an order consolidating the appeal and petition for purposes of review by the court. The DCA then affirmed the trial court. The DCA noted that appointment of minors counsel did not violate any constitutional right of father to determine and advance his daughter's best interests. The trial court's order for parents to pay the minors counsel did not violate father's due process right to direct and provide for daughter's education. The appointment of minors counsel did not violate father's due process right to determine with whom his daughter could associate, and the trial court acted within its discretion in appointing counsel for M. For our last few minutes together, I want to turn my attention to a few things that might help you as minors counsel, but also might help you in your own presentations as attorneys in other cases where you represent one of the parents. Last year, Tom Hanks received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Golden Globe Awards. Toward the end of his acceptance speech, Hanks shared a three-step formula for success that he said he learned decades ago. It's simple and it's brilliant, and it could completely change the way you work. The first thing he said is, show up on time. Here's what he said. Showing up on time is one of the greatest liberating acts you can give yourself in a movie. That means those people with radios in their ears don't need to knock on your door and say they're ready for you. You're actually already ready. And you have the liberty and you have the freedom of being there early enough to settle down because when the time comes, you have to hit the mark, you have to go there. This lesson extends far beyond a film set. Being on time or early enough to settle down, as Hanks calls it, is a key way to develop emotional intelligence because of everything it does for you and the people you work with. For example, being early gives you enough time to get comfortable with your surroundings, get a drink of water, use the restroom, settle your mind, and gather your thoughts. These things may seem small, but they actually help you to achieve more calm and confidence, and they can affect your presentation as attorneys, whether you're minors counsel or counsel for an adult in a family law case. But that's not all. Showing up on time gives the added advantages of showing respect for others' time, demonstrating the abilities of good organization, reliability, and a good work ethic, and building your reputation as a professional. Do you have the habit of always showing up late or just under the wire? If so, it's time to make a change. If you're trying to do too much, cut out the unnecessary things. Don't overbook yourself. Start scheduling more time between appointments and plan to arrive early. This will help when you run into the unexpected, like bad traffic or a missed connection. The second thing he said is know the text. Here's his quote. Knowing your text, it's not just your lines, it's the whole thing. You might not be right in the opinion you bring to it, but you've got to come at it with some direction. In a word, Hanks is speaking here about preparation. Generally speaking, the more prepared you are, the more successful you'll be. Think about it. Professional athletes, creatives, even analysts and number crunchers. Often it's not the smartest or most talented person in the room who's the most successful. It's the one who comes the most prepared. This is just one reason behind one of Amazon's most interesting business practices. Jeff Bezos begins every executive meeting with about half an hour of silence so that everyone has time to read a well-prepared memo, all getting on the same page before they begin a discussion. Of course, most of us don't have that liberty. So the way to set yourself apart from the pack is to make sure you take the time to know the text, so to speak. Come to court prepared. And finally, Hanks says, have a head full of ideas. Here's what he said. The head full of ideas. Bring anything. Try anything. They might not use it. If it stinks, they won't use it. He says, am I right, Marty Scorsese? You see, the best companies, like the best actors and directors, are successful because their employees are constantly seeking to try new things to grow and improve. Routines and processes are helpful, but growth doesn't happen when you always do things the exact same way. Growth is a result of being willing to take risks, to break out of your comfort zone, and to embrace failure when it happens. Because out of failure comes learning, and out of learning comes growth. Without new ideas, you'll never even get a chance to fail. That's why taking time for concentrated thought, filling your head with ideas, is a major key to success. That's easier said than done in a world where scrolling and watching has replaced concentrated thinking. But if you buy out time to think, you'll have a major advantage. Don't leave it to chance. Put it on the calendar. Put on calendar think time. Then treat it like an unmissable appointment. So, are you ready to do more, to go higher? The formula is simple. Show up on time, know the text, and have a head full of ideas. And if it worked for Tom Hanks, it'll work for you. But I don't want to end without thanking you for your service as minors counsel. Hopefully these thoughts have helped you at least a little bit.